What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Spill the Beans. Today I'm sitting down with Gary Harper. Gary Harper owns Sharper Business Solutions. He has an awesome story about being in corporate America and understanding how systems and processes should be built out in a large organization, and then taking that and pivoting it into the entrepreneurial, startup business, small business world in order to help small business owners have more predictable results. So he's in town filming for Legacy Wealth Academy. I'm going to sit down with him, hear a little bit more about what he's got going on, and really extract as much as I possibly can about how he automates, systematizes, and puts processes in place for small business owners. So Gary, how are you doing, buddy? Welcome to Charleston, South Carolina.
Thank you very much for having me, man.
Yeah, man. I'm excited. So you're in town filming for Legacy Wealth Academy.
Yep.
Doing a master class. And dude, you're one of the authorities on systems and processes and procedures. So I'm excited to just sit down and dive into all that kind of stuff. Before we get into like the actual, tactics and strategies and things that can be implemented by people who are watching this, can you give us a little bit of a background on like, why are you the authority? Why should people listen to you? Where did you start out your entrepreneurial journey? And how'd you learn all this stuff?
Yeah. So it started for me in corporate America. I started in '97. I came up into Chicago, started working with my brother-in-law, Wayne Schaefer, which you may or may not know, but he kind of helped me, mentor me into real estate. And then he was working in Chicago, so he brought me into Chicago, and we started working for a company that did copy work for different organizations. It was kind of interesting that where I started, but it wasn't too long into that
as in copying,
like copying,
Xerox kind of stuff?
Xerox stuff,
yeah,
right?
gotcha.
Like copy rooms and stuff like that for law firms and things like that. And so I started off with the American Bar Association actually binding books, right? Like at $7.15 an hour. And it wasn't too long from that this mailroom type scenario, managing it for Fortune 500 companies, moved into messenger and courier services, and they just started expanding into non-core function type things. And so I started finding my path and working my way up in these organizations, and it was an outsourced company. And by '97, I worked for a company called Icon, right? And it was I Know One Name, and it was I Know One Name in office services, right? And they started adding like records management and processes and systems and that whole scenario. And so I started getting trained at $7.15 an hour, started working my way up, didn't have a degree in anything at the time, and just started learning from different people, and actually worked with GE Financial and Jack Welch, and then ended up working with Discover Card and Northwestern University, Carrier Corporation, and they hired me through this, we called it business process outsourcing. And so BPM is what it was. And so they would hire me, I'd come in, and I'd look at their systems and process and help them re-engineer it to bring more productivity to it. And
how old are you at this time?
So I was 21 years old.
And you're coming into Fortune 500 companies. Isn't that amazing? How hey, we'll send out some consultants, and it's some 21-year-old kid, right?
Exactly.
But for somebody who actually cares, you're like, well, I got to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So you really study this stuff. You really get ingrained and like totally consumed by it.
Yeah.
So,
I'll never forget. I was with Rotary International, and the gentleman, his name was Ed, who was the general secretary. He was asking some questions, and I was there with our senior vice president. His name was Walter, and I'm sitting at this table, and I made a suggestion. And the guy looks at me and kind of just like, who's this kid? And looks back at Walter, and Walter's in his 50s at that point. And he said something, and I said something again, and he looked at me again. He's like, uh-huh. And he looked back, and he asked another question, and I answered it. Every time I answered it, you could see it was kind of hitting with him, like, that was a good answer. And then he finally looked at me, and he's like, who are you, right? And I'm like, well, told him my name, and it's like, I'm learning this, I'm doing this. And he was like, these are really good answers, but man, are you even old enough to be sitting at this table right now, right?
You're smart, but you have wisdom.
Yeah. And he's like, how old are you? Because I looked like I was 16. And so we're walking out. Walter looks at me, and he's like, hey, listen, man, people aren't going to take you seriously because you look so young. He's like, but can I think it'd be good if you grew some facial hair.
Really?
Yeah. And he was like, you can grow facial hair, right? And I remember thinking like...
I'm 37 and I can't. I can't. This is about as best as I can do.
This came in because of that meeting. And I've never cut it off since. right? It's been there because I always looked that young. Right now, the gray is starting to come in and stuff, and I'm like, I might go dye my hair and cut the hair, the facial hair off at this point. But
we're trying to go the other way.
But I just worked myself up, and working around people that had industry experiences and systems and Six Sigma, and I got certified in Six Sigma and things like that. It enabled me to learn a trade, right? And then being in real estate, which is where I kind of started with Wayne. By 2004, I started buying and selling houses, started buying and holding. We had, a property management company that my wife and Susan worked together in with my dad. And so those worlds kind of came together by 2007, 2008. Still full-time in corporate America, but then passive income, right? And cash flow. And just following that Carlton Sheets and Robert Kiyosaki models that we were studying in the 90s, right? Nobody really knows who Carlton Sheets is. He recently has passed away, which I found was very interesting. Sad, but those guys kind of pioneered it.
For sure.
And I don't know if you were, when your journey started, but like it was taboo to talk about real estate secrets. Before 2010. Like if you talked about it, those guys got a lot of heat for creating curriculum and training that would help entrepreneurs become successful in real estate investing. And so they kind of pioneered the way for guys like us, right? But you fast forward a little bit, 2011, I got sick with Lyme disease and almost passed away, and was forced out of corporate America, where I'd been like executive of the year, 7 out of 10 years, 750 employees, 50 mid-level management, that kind of thing, working with Fortune 500 companies with systems and processes and building that out. And I fast-tracked my career, and now a little older, I was 35 years old and been in corporate for a long time. My brother-in-law said to me, he's like, when I got better, he's like, I'll tell you what, why don't you come work with me? And that year we did 48 deals together, and we met sometime after that and Collective Genius. I think 2013, 2014.
A little bit after that. I joined, I don't know, 16, I think, 17, something like that.
All the last 10 years kind of ran together.
I know.
It's crazy where it went.
It's been a wild run.
It has. It has been fun.
So by joining and getting into those groups and seeing other entrepreneurs and realizing like this guy doesn't know, he's doing deals because he's great at sales, but he's got a great work ethic, but he has zero business, right? And you're seeing that, and you realize there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, and we're at this mastermind, and honestly, we kept hearing things like, "Hey, can I get your CEO dashboard?" and how do you track that number? And where'd you get that information from? And
what's a KPI?
Yeah, what's a KPI? And then I was telling my wife the other day, like, just getting the industry to the point of tracking key performance indicators. Not knowing that there's a key process indicator, there's a key profit indicator, there's a key performance indicator, and I've actually created one that I've coined as the key, purpose indicator, right? Like that BHAG goal. What is that? But you're right, like guys just didn't have that stuff.
So why don't we break down each one of those? So KPI, define what a KPI is.
So there's a key process indicator. We come in and we process map out your business, right? We're creating the process is what you do. Procedures are how you do it, and the policy is when you do it, right? Scott, your friend Scott, phenomenal HR, right? Like he's coming in building policies. He's building HR documents, right? That's not really my wheelhouse. I don't really live there. But there's a key policy indicator, that's a service level agreement. Like what's the expectations around this? But you also have a key process indicator that comes off the process. So in like single family, it's just like how many offers did you make, right? Most guys look at that as performance. It's not a performance metric. The performance is how many contracts did you get, right?
So the performance is more the result of the process.
Yeah, it's your close ratios, how many contracts you got, things like that. And when you process map something out, the very end of that process is the performance. That's your key performance indicator. And so we make sure those get measured on a weekly basis. Process indicators, however, have to be measured on a daily basis. Because process can change.
That's the activity that you're doing on a daily basis that leads to the result.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of people who, I don't know, we might even be one of them, who like commingle those two things, right? Yeah. And so you just help them separate that and measure them differently. But it sounds like you really got to focus on the process indicators, right? Because that's what really actually moves the needle.
It does. And so what happens is, and a lot of guys, especially in real estate, where our frustration comes is they borrow other people's processes, which is fine from a framework perspective. But if you don't get in and dialing it in yourself, then you're not going to understand your process. And so when the industry or your market starts to shift, you have to wait for somebody else to tell you how to adjust the process. So it's really important to like, framework-wise, borrow it, right? But then dial it in. Because from that, you pull out your key process indicator. and your key process indicator comes off your process. And if you're measuring somebody else's process and their market hasn't shifted, but yours has, you're in trouble. And so we started seeing this shift in the market in March. It was small shifts, but we started seeing it. And so why? Because that process indicator started showing us it wasn't working.
Yeah.
So we always tell people, measure the process indicators daily, and you better make changes to that process by the end of the week if you miss that KPI 3 times or more.
I mean, the reality is it's a leading indicator versus a lagging indicator, because otherwise, you're 3, 4, 5 months into doing those same activities and not realizing that you're not getting those results until down the road.
Right.
And now it's too late, right?
Yeah.
Now everybody else has pivoted, or you've blown a bunch of money on marketing or things that aren't working. So no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so we measure that process daily, change it weekly. Here's why. If the process is broke for 1 week, it affects 3 weeks of performance, right?
I can see that, yeah.
And here's the thing we've learned in real estate, right? When somebody has 3 pain points or more, they become very motivated to change. If you don't measure that process but once a week, it's 3 weeks before you're changing. And if it's 1 week of broken process affects 3 weeks of performance, your whole quarter is over.
Right.
You've lost out, right? So your performance is going to be very lagging at that point. 40X talks about lead and lag. And that's what it is, right? They don't go into a really good job of explaining how to get that lead metric, which is the process indicator.
Yeah.
Right? And so we measure that daily, change it weekly. Performance gets measured weekly and changed monthly, right? Because performance is a person problem,
Yeah.
right? Man, I don't know how many times somebody will come to me and say, hey, I had to let so-and-so go. I'm like, really? They were really good. Yeah, but they stopped performing. I'm like, oh, did you review the process? Well, no. You still doing your process meetings on Friday? No, we haven't done those in a while. Then how do you know it was performance? And then what happens is we hire somebody else to come in, and guess what? We train them on the process.
Yeah.
And then we find the problem, and the problem was the process, not the person.
Not the person.
Right?
So you lost a great player.
Yeah.
And now you got to go through the process of hiring somebody new, paying for, a placement fee, training them, and taking on, they say when you lose an employee, or if you have a bad hire or something that doesn't, it costs twice as much as an annual salary on that person to go through the whole process of brain damage, or not brain damage, but brain drain that takes away from you performing, right?
Yeah.
And then going through the whole training process and all the other actual costs that are associated with, but all the intangibles as well.
And so the process, right, creates that process indicator. But the other thing when we process map, it helps us reduce the waste out of the process. A lot of people jump straight to the procedures, like how to do it. We talk about the 5 phases of business, so we have a company called Empire, and Empire is a curriculum that takes you through all 5 phases. And in that curriculum, depending on what phase you're in, each one of these things show up. So in stage 2, phase 2 of business, would be process. We're trying to get the process out of our head on paper so that we can create the rule for people to follow. But when you get into stage 3, the procedure shows up, right? Because you're no longer there every single day, managing it, running it, and you're there for the how. So the procedure has to come in at that point, right? And so process, procedures, policies, all those things come out to play. And then the last one's profit indicator.
And so explain what that is.
Yeah, profit indicator is, it's your P&L, right? It's the numbers, profit per deal, average cost per spread. Those are profit indicators, right? Anything that talks to money. Depending on your cash conversion cycle in a business, which like real estate a lot of times is 30 days, we'll look at a P&L at the end of the month. And if we are not in line with the budget, our variance from actual to budget's off, then it tells us the profit indicator is not working, right? And so we will give that 3 months before we change strategy. But that's why a quarterly should happen every quarter, and that's a strategic planning session. That meeting is geared based off your profit indicator, right? If you walk in and you're making bank, right? You're making good money, and the profit indicators are showing that it is, and the strategy you projected and visioned out is there in place, you won't change strategy. But if that profit's not coming in where it needs to be, guess what?
Yeah, you're pretty open.
Yeah, you're like, hey, I'm ready to change.
Yeah, for
right?
sure. So all right, so let's go by an example.
Sure.
Let's say I come in with one of my businesses and I sit down with you, and what do you do to diagnose, right? Like, not diagnose, but because there might not be anything wrong, but what do you do in order to just audit what's happening? Like, what does that process look like? How do you figure out where there's gaps, where there's holes that need to be plugged, and things that need to be fixed? So, like when a new business comes to you, what does that initial audit look like?
So when a new business comes to us, they go through an audit. And that's exactly what it is. And we are diagnosing. I actually wrote a book called Is Your Business Sick, right? It's on Amazon. And that book talks about like what the things that make our business unhealthy. And so when I got Lyme disease in 2011, obviously I got a parasite that affected my body, made me sick. Well, parasites affect our business too. Anything robbing resources from our company is going to hurt it, right? And so we're measuring in a couple areas. First of all, we start and look at your business to see what phase of business you're in.
Okay.
You could either
and what are the phases of business?
Yeah, so startup is the first phase. It's usually 6 to 12 months of the startup of a business. Predetermined time, money, resources. We're looking at it and saying, hey, is this a business we want to keep going?
So you're looking at it from a timeline, not based on like a revenue perspective.
Both.
A little bit of both?
Yeah, time, first one. Second is money. And then third is what resources do we have and are they working?
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. So those are the three things we're using in startup mode. And a business can come out of startup in 6 months. It can come out startup in 90 days if we hit the target quickly.
Or still be in startup in 3 years.
It can. That's the biggest part, right? Like, and so we go from startup now to perseverance, which is stage 2. And I was telling these people earlier, I said, you know, these 5 phases are not like Garyology, right? This is like the Harvard 5 phases of business.
Yeah.
I titled them a little differently, but stage 2 is what we call perseverance. A lot of people refer to as the grinding stage, right? It's self-employment. It's when you're sitting in multiple seats in your organization, multiple leadership seats, key individual seats in your organization. You don't have an operating system. Yeah. You're not tracking metrics. You don't have a vision plan. You know,
and don't really have a team.
Right. You don't have a team, but the concept works, right? So you're making money.
You're making money, and there's a proof of concept there, and you're like, I got something.
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah. So in that phase, if that's the case, we identify you in phase 2, and then we're going to be looking at what do we need to do. So we're looking at implementing vision. We're implementing culture. We're implementing the right people.
Makes sense.
Who do we hire at this point?
It just gives you clarity.
Yeah.
Where are we going? Like, let's create a roadmap.
Right. And we're looking at long-term and short-term in that roadmap. We're also looking at what metrics would you track, right? We look at a thing called the SIPOC of a business, the supply, input, process, output, customer, right? That's the funnel. A lot of guys refer to it as funnel. There's actually a name for it. In business, we've known it for 30 years. It's called SIPOC.
Interesting.
Yeah. And if you're supplier focused, it's called copious.
Okay.
Right? So if you're customer focused, you're trying to get a product to a customer, then it's SIPOC. If you're trying to get a product to your supplier, then it's copious. And so everybody's referred to it.
It's funny. It's all the same stuff. It's just kind of repackaged, repurposed, and marketed differently.
Sure.
And like, what's the new buzzword on it?
Yeah, and so I mean, all this stuff,
which shows you that this stuff is timeless, right?
It is.
If you understand what you're doing, it's not a flash in the pan. If you understand this side of the business, then you can implement this for decades, for millennia, and across all different industries too.
Yeah. All this stuff's regurgitated from Rockefeller. You know, Rockefeller really is the pioneer of it all. There's really not a book that you're going to read right now, including Empire, that you don't go back to, and the fundamentals come from Rockefeller.
Wild.
Right? And so he just pioneered the way you run a business, and people have modeled it. There's variations and changes to it. And there's systems out there like 13-week year and Scrum and things like that are going to focus on 13 weeks or less. The danger in that is they focus on short-term vision, which drives results. That's what short-term vision does. It drives results. But long-term vision creates culture, it creates potential, and it honestly inspires. It creates hope.
Yeah.
You have to have a little of both, right? So we're looking at that in that phase. We're looking at the people aspect, hiring. We use predictive index to help hire the right people. Then we get into metrics. What are your performance metrics, right? What are your process indicators? What are your profit indicators? We're getting into meeting structure, communication structure in the organization and those pillars around that. And then we're looking at the profit. We're looking at making sure that we're going to be protecting the profit. I call it BOS confidence, right? You have to be business operating system confident to move into the next phase, right? And so phase 3 is now
So phase 2, solopreneur. What do you typically see from like a revenue perspective?
So it's interesting. Revenue could be all over the map in that phase.
100,000 up to $1 million kind of a thing typically.
Yeah, it's more about the activity and how they're operating the business.
Got it.
You get a really high-end individual, they can make $10 million in perseverance.
Yeah.
And the product and the market.
E-commerce stores or something along those lines that are very scalable kind of in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, and we coach. We're known in this space for real estate. But I was talking earlier, and I said, we actually coach 2 hip hop recording studios. We pistachio companies, massive organizations. We were with an e-commerce company in Vegas 2 weeks ago. They're all the same. So revenue can vary so much, but it's really the practice, how they're practicing business, right? In stage 2, very commonly we hear this phrase: "I want my time back." right? When somebody's
I'm burning
saying,
the candle at both ends, 80 hours a week. I can't figure this out. I'm making money, but I don't know what the next step is.
Yeah.
I vividly remember it because it was such a painful place to be.
yeah, and that's why people call it the grind, right? I call it perseverance, but people say I'm grinding, right? And that's what they're doing. So we want to be able to work on giving them their time back, right? The right structure, the right vision, the right people, the right metrics. We want to empower them to let go without losing control. That's the goal of stage 2. Stage 3 is where we're looking to see if the business is a viable business and how it's viable. We're looking at people, leaders.
What's stage 3 called?
It's viability.
Viability?
Yeah. And so a lot of times people skip this phase. It's really frustrating. When you hear about a business that didn't make it, it's usually because they skipped stage 3.
Okay.
We get people that go through like EOS and those type of systems that are very much a stage 2 product, where scaling up lives more in the phase 4.
Yep.
Scaling. People go from this straight to that all the time because their product's making money and they're like looking at it and like making 60% margins. But they're sitting in every seat in the organization still, right? And so when they go from here, perseverance straight to scale, it implodes, right? And it destroys their business. Viability is about making sure it should be a scalable business. It's in that phase that we're budgeting, right? Even if you're sitting in 5 or 6, 7 seats still, because as an entrepreneur, you still may have to. We start budgeting for each seat you're sitting in, right? We're looking at productivity in that.
In order to hire somebody to take that seat over.
Yeah, because when you go to scale, you're forced out of the seat. That's probably the biggest thing people complain about. It's like, man, I thought this was like a 70%, 60% margin business. And then I 10X'd it and I don't make any money anymore.
Yeah.
I always say this. People say in stage 2, I want my time back. I want my time. Stage 4, they're like, I want my money back.
I was going to say, I've been through both.
Yeah. And the only reason you hear that song is because they don't go to viability. Viability is about getting the right leaders, right? People that can lead with you. Because if not, then the business is going to only go scale to your 100%. So getting the right leaders, developing leaders, succession planning, right? Automation. We're looking at research and development in that phase. We're looking at productivity. How do we improve it? There's 8 reasons that cause a business not to be productive, 7 of which are process related. Only 1 is behavior.
Really?
Yeah. And so in that phase,
and everybody thinks it's behavior. Everybody thinks it's because people are lazy or they're working from home and they're not paying attention to work. And
yeah.
Really, yeah.
And it's because we didn't create good leaders and we didn't lean out the process. So in stage 2, we're documenting the process. Stage 3, we're documenting the procedure, right? After we've leaned the process out and created efficiency. It's really where Six Sigma kind of comes into play, right?
Define what Six Sigma is.
Yeah, so for everybody listening, Six Sigma is a methodology in which we drive the defects out of the business, right?
It came out of Japan,
Yep.
right?
So
like in their high efficiency, high productivity stages in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, so there was Army, and then there was iOS 9000. There was all these different Six Sigma came after that. And so what happened was, when I worked with GE, is really where I got certified in it. It came out of Motorola. Jack Welch brought it to the business world. It was manufacturing was what it was. But the whole concept is to drive the defects completely out of the process.
Just trim the fat.
Yep. And so a Six Sigma company says that they have 1 defect per million opportunities. So for every
define what an opportunity is.
An opportunity is flying a plane. It is, making an offer. Like every time you have an opportunity, we call it an empire laying your brick.
Okay.
Where your solution meets the opportunity or meets their need. It's a per opportunity that you have in a business to do. And it can be broken down to every business process, performance process. And we're looking at it and going, all right, did we have a defect? In other words, did we have rework? In real estate, guys say the average time you need a follow-up to get a deal is 7 times. You've heard that before, right?
Heard that before.
I don't know that to be true. I heard somebody say it about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And everybody's like put it as a staple in the industry.
Yeah. No,
but in Six Sigma, and nobody challenges it, by the way, they just go 7 times. Are you sure? Because I think we've got a little bit better, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more training, a little bit more technology. Maybe it's not 7 times anymore, right? Maybe it's 2.
Yeah.
But those are defects. Every single time you have to rework your process, it's a defect in your process, right? And so we have to find a better way to do it and drive the defects out. Most corporate American companies are 2 to 3 Sigma versus a 6 Sigma business.
Yeah.
Really hard to get 6 Sigma.
I was going to say, it sounds very difficult.
Yeah. But can you imagine if the airline industry adopted 6 Sigma and they had a plane falling out of the sky, one plane for every 1,000,000 times they flew? That'd be disastrous, right?
Man.
So they can't be 6 Sigma, but in the business world, we could try to, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the philosophy behind Six Sigma. But in that phase is where we're really looking at that. And then profitability. Creating a budget that is what it is based on going to scale. Like every seat filled, the average wholesale business, for example, has 48 seats. I mean,
wow.
48. Like some of them are an hour a week, some of them are 3 hours a week, but there's still 48 seats in a wholesale business.
Wow.
So you scale that thing, you have a potential of having 48 different people, right? So creating a budget around that, so when you go to scale, you know exactly what that money looks like. Small Business Association exists for one reason and one reason only: support that phase 3 business. Not every business is meant to scale. I have 14 right now. I'm not scaling all of them.
Yeah.
Right? There's probably 3 that I'll scale, or have scaled. But there are some that's like Sharper Education. It's 9 hours of streaming content. I ain't trying to scale that business. It is what it is. It's going to stay right where it is. And it produces and it does well.
And so what differentiates the businesses that you want to scale versus the ones that are not scalable or you don't want to scale?
2 things. One, purpose, right? What am I doing it for? Sometimes it's a support product to the overall purpose and the ecosystem that I'm looking to have. But more times than not, it's like, what's my return on time? And what's my return on investment, right? And if I'm not going to get those, or it's going to suck up my time, or it's not going to give me a high return on investment, then I'm not scaling it, right? And I tend at this point to measure time over money more now than ever, right? I even in a stage 3 business, I'm starting to measure the return on productivity hour. So for example, in stage 3, I start to time study those processes. I have a time study for when I have my real estate company.
What does that look like?
Literally, I take that process and I time study the cycle. How long does it take to do this step from here to here? And so I have a software we created that you put in your volume off your CRM, and it tells you exactly how much time you earned, right? And it's based off a 6.5-hour workday because nobody's productive for 8 straight hours. But you realize in entrepreneurs, and this is the thing that this industry is going to start to feel, and there's going to be a big change coming. If I can lead the way, I will. But we only work about 4.5 productive hours a day.
It's actually more than I thought you were going to say.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like 2.5.
Yeah.
Like
No, it's
that's
low.
actually more productive than I thought. But yeah, because I've done, just cataloging how I spend my time on a daily basis. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what did I spend my time on, right? I was checking emails, I was checking social media, I was responding to messages, but like the actual work, the needle moving work that moves production and moves, just moves the business forward was like a couple hours a day. And I was like, oh man, I need to be more efficient. And then I just eliminated a lot of the other stuff or delegated a lot of it. And then I was able to focus. And that's really what took me from doing 6 figures to multiple 6 figures, and then multiple 6 figures into 7 figures, is that clearly defined and understanding of how are you spending your time.
Well, that's why. And people don't realize that the return on time gives a higher ROI, right, financially. And that's what you experience, right? Whether it was purpose-driven or it was, you said, I just want to get my time back.
Right.
Because you started to measure that, it required an investment into time, right? So when we measure people's productivity, we're measuring on a 6.5-hour day. I want to get people to 6.5 hours of productivity.
That'd be amazing. Yeah.
Because here's an example. We get people that hire VAs in this industry, right? And they're all in on VAs. And I love VAs. But when you have the mindset that VA is only cost you $7 an hour, let's say $10 an hour, right? If they're only productive for 4 hours a day, they're costing you $20 per productivity hour.
Right, that's a good point.
They're not costing you $8 an hour. They're costing you $20.
I was going to say, there's a lot of room for just, whatever. It's not that big of a deal, you know? But if they don't produce the way that I want, because it's only a $7 an hour. But when you start looking at it like that, it's actually $20 an hour if you're paying for their actual productivity, then guess what? You could hire somebody from locally that can be in the office more often at that same price point. Yeah,
and that you can put eyeballs on and manage the productivity. When we document processes, we're wanting to make sure that all activities are value add, though, right? I tell a story about a company in Chicago that we went in, and Fortune 500, if I said the name, you'd know it. They're a club company, and they asked us to look at their process in bill payments and decrease the cycle time. Short story, we find out that the mailroom is indexing all their invoices, and it's taking about 20 hours a week to index all their mail, right? And then they're putting it on a spreadsheet, rubber banding it, and taking it up to the finance department. So the whole time he's telling me this process, I go, why do you do that? Why do you do that? Why do you do that? He couldn't give me an answer.
Yeah.
Finally, we get up to finance.
That's how we've always done it.
It's exactly what they said.
Bad answer.
Yeah, right. Now I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Yeah. So I get up to finance, and I look at the lady Betty, and I'm like, Betty, why do they do that for you? Because he kept saying, Betty wants it, Betty wants it, Betty wants it. She goes, I don't know why they do that. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know why they do it? She's like, I don't know why. He's like, in 1985, Betty, you told me to start doing this. This is 2001, by the way. 16 years, 20 hours a week, average pay of $15 an hour. You do the math, it's about $250,000 total.
Wow.
That they wasted because they didn't eliminate the waste from the process. Right?
That's just one.
Just one. It was mailroom. $250,000. Now, we're not a Fortune 500 company, so a mailroom process isn't going to cost us that kind of money. But just think about the waste that shows up in the process, and that robs our productivity. Productivity is based on value add, right? So there's three categories: VA, value add; NVA, non-value add; and the ENVA, which is essential non-value add. There are essential things you have to do. Answer email. That doesn't bring value. Doesn't make you money in a direct way. But it's essential. Anything that's non-valued has to be brought out of the process, right? And we're leaning that out. That's what we call the 8 deadly sins of waste. We're looking to lean those. But what's really cool about that, once we do that, then we time study the process. Then we can take the volume times the time study, and it'll tell us how many hours we've earned.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then from that, we can divide how many hours we paid. And it tells us how productive people were, right? And I don't use that on a daily basis. People will hear this on your show, and they'll be like, that's micromanagement, right? And it is. But here's where it's key.
I mean, do you need to do it all the time? Do you need to do it a couple times a year? Like, I feel like just having the clarity there, and it's like, I don't know, it's one of those things you do a few times a year, and it just kind of cleans everything up. I don't know, I go through my credit card statement. I'm like, look at all these recurring bills, like cancel. I do it like once a year, and then I don't think about it again. Yeah. But it cleans it up and moves things forward for the next, 6, 12 months.
Yeah, and here's the other part, and you're absolutely right. But the other thing that this does for your business is it protects your employee. You know how many people we lose every year because they're burned out, right? I mean, you do have people that just kick it in for you all the time. And they may not be productive 4.5 hours, but then you have them doing all this non-value added activity stuff throughout the day, and they don't know it. They just fill their day with it, but it still burns them out. So when we get somebody that's 105% productivity, I want somebody to be 95 to 105% productivity of 6.5 hours. Once they eclipse that 105, I have a potential of burning them out. And that's what I'm going to hire. As soon as they hit that 95 to 105%, I'm hiring somebody else at that point, right?
Yeah, I was. That brings up a good point. So you're not hiring just to hire a good person, right? Nope. You're hiring once you reach capacity, and then let's bring somebody else in.
Yeah, which is why it's so important in stage 3, because we're about to expand. How many people do you think you need? Right? If your processes aren't lean and they're not efficient and people are only working for, you're going to have double the staff and you're going to have a lot of wasted opportunity.
And double the overhead, right? Double the half the lack of cash flow, if not less than that.
Right.
And that's what usually puts businesses out of business, right? At too much overhead. So, which comes primarily from too much staff.
Yeah, and that's the other part to this, why we time study, is because once we have those numbers, you go to another market, you drop your volume in. As soon as you drop your volume, it tells you exactly how much staff you need to open that market, right? Which is expansion. And that's what stage 4. Stage 4, and the only reason we leave stage 3, which is very profitable, very lean, very productive, the only reason we leave that and expand, and by the way, when you go to expansion, there's no guarantee it's going to work at expansion, right? What worked at this phase may not work in stage 4. So it's a reinvestment of your time, your money, your resources to scale. The only reason I tell people to go to scale is purpose, right? If your purpose doesn't support the scale, don't do it. Stay away from it, right? But if it does support it, then you have every right in the world and obviously an obligation to go to scale.
Yeah.
Right? But if you don't do it right, you don't make sure it's a viable business, you'll scale and you'll find yourself hating it. How many masterminds we've been in, Tim, where guys are like, I hate this. I just hate it. Because they scaled for money, not purpose. Right? And they hate their job. They hate their business.
I mean, it's sad how many business owners are in that place, making more money than they've ever made, and at the same time totally unhappy because of all the headaches and all the nonsense that comes with it.
Yeah, and money, does make life easier. I always tell people money gives you choice.
For sure.
That's all it does.
Options.
Gives you options, and what you do with those options to whether or not you create happiness. Happiness comes from options. It doesn't come from money, right? It's when we choose the wrong things that then robs our happiness again. Right? And so stage 4 is all about expansion. A lot of times in real estate, we don't see an expansion of like volume. We see an expansion horizontally of like adding other products, right? You know what? Single family and multifamily, commercial, and then brokerage and syndications and construction. And that's called an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem expansion.
Yeah.
And so I get excited about ecosystems. I love working with guys that are in that phase.
Yeah, I always wanted that, right? When I was a solopreneur in phase 1 and 2, like I always wanted, I want the brokerage, I want the construction, I want the investment fund, I want like all the management company, all these different things. And then I started growing and I was like, damn, those are all different businesses, right? I need like a COO of every single one of those. And I understand how much time it's just getting my investment business off the ground. I couldn't imagine trying to spend this much time on 5 different businesses. So we outsourced all those things.
Good.
And now we're at a point where we've kind of broken past phase 3 and into phase 4. I don't know kind of where you would say that we are, but we got a big enough organization now with a bunch of A players and a bunch of executives who are rock stars and definitely, I'm sure, could dial in our processes even further. But now we're like, well, hey, we have resources. We're making money. We have a big enough staff and big enough team. Let's look to bring the investment fund in. Let's look to bring management in-house. Let's look to hire somebody to coordinate and control all the construction side of things and the supply side of things. And so we thought it was really cool to like vertically integrate, and I was like, we can't do that for where we were. But now that we got over to phase 4,
and that's where I would say
5,
you are. Yeah, and so expansion, which is that phase 4 at scale, when we create that ecosystem, it's exactly what it is. We have a CEO, right? Usually of a holdings company, and then you have a COO, right? They're working there, and then you have a C-level group, CMO, CGO, CIO, CFOs, and then you have business unit leaders. And those business unit leaders are in that downline vertical niche and focus just on that, right? And we don't want them cross-focused. I said this morning in Legacy Wealth Academy, we were recording, that we need to make sure we stay focused from the business unit leader down. And focus is an acronym. You've ever heard the acronym before? Follow one course until successful. Right. So stay focused. And so we don't want anybody outside of that organization focused on a different one, right? So they stay in that down line, and then you have the different business unit leaders of each niche focused on those niches. And then you usually pull HR out because their niche is those businesses, finance out, and IT out.
And so they kind of go across all the different business units.
Because their niche is hiring people.
Right.
Their niche is finance, right? So they are a shared resource to all those different businesses.
And then the C-level executives, they kind of understand and think like a business owner, and they're looking at all the different components.
And so they're working with those
business leaders themselves. Focus, like obsess over the management side of things, obsess over construction, obsess over.
Just obsess over the P&L, making sure that it's being run right. You know, in your EOS model, like the integrator type mindset, that's what we're wanting. Typically, the financial structure starts to change a little bit. You go from getting profit per business to contribution dollar, and then the contribution dollar becomes a top line revenue of the holdings company to feed the C-level group. And so then the ecosystem shoots off. You know, when a company goes public, they only go public with a holdings company, right? So like Canon, for example, they had multiple arms, right? But it was Canon USA, right? And that's what was public. And so each one of these different business units had a contribution that they were required to hit to feed the top line revenue.
Do you think, like, when we go out to like masterminds, and usually it's the visionary CEOs that are in those rooms, right? And then all of a sudden, you know, they realize I need to bring my team, bring the operator, the integrator into the business too. But whenever I'm in these rooms, I think there's like, it's a bunch of visionaries, right, for the most part. And everybody's asking, I need to find a COO like yours, Tim, or I need to get an operations person. Do you think there's more visionaries in the world, more operators in the world, more mid-level managers in the world? Like, is it really that hard to find people?
So it's interesting in real estate. In the world, there's one visionary for every 3 integrators. So
because that's what I would believe. I would believe that there's far more operators and people who are good at operations than there are really visionaries who are thinking big.
And it's funny because visionaries just naturally gravitate towards real estate. So like almost all the visionaries, right? Like I don't know the number,
we're
but
all there. Yeah.
they seem to have all collected right here in real
Yeah.
estate. Here's the thing though, integrators won't. They don't like it. It's too risky.
Interesting.
Integrators don't like risk. Their job is to eliminate risk. Their job is to create structure and process and order. And up until now, nobody has identified and looked at this industry like a true industry, right? And because of that, integrators go, no, I'm good.
Yeah, like real estate investing wasn't really a thing until, I don't know,
3 years ago.
Yeah,
It really was.
Yeah, I mean, it was smaller. Now everybody does it in the past 3 to 5 years. Before that, there were some of us who were investing in '08 to 2015. But like, if you ask somebody to raise their hand, who's been investing more than since before 2015? It's like almost nobody. And I feel like before 2000, the run up in '03 to '07, it was almost nobody before that. Entrepreneurs were like just the weirdos who couldn't get a job, you know? And now it's like cool and trendy, and everybody wants to be an entrepreneur.
Totally. And that's what we find is that we've got a lot of visionaries in this industry and very little integrators, right? The more we treat it like a business, the more the integrator wants to come to your business, right? Everybody always says, you know, you just said it, Tim, I got to find somebody like you got. Well, then you got to run your operation like Tim. Because you're not going to find somebody like he's got if you're running in a half-hearted organization that's not an operationally driven business, right? And here's the other thing is, this is one of the things I posted about on Facebook actually the other day. I said everybody wants an A players on their team, but nobody wants to be an A leader, right? One of the things that turns an integrator away the most is when you as a visionary are a terrible leader. Right? They don't want to come work for somebody that's a terrible leader.
And let's talk, like, what are some of those things that make you a terrible leader versus the things that an integrator would want to see in order to come and work for somebody who is a great leader?
Well, it's the constant change, right? It's the constant,
going in different directions.
Yeah, all the time.
Chasing the shiny objects.
Yeah. They come back from a mastermind and they go, we're doing it all wrong. We have to start all over again, right? Like, they don't give things time to work. You know, that can be very frustrating to an integrator. Now, a good integrator knows how to manage that as well. But then you cripple that with bad culture, right? You cripple that with the wrong mindset. You cripple that with not wanting to follow any type of structure or plan. You cripple that, and here's probably the one thing that irritates an integrator more than anything. I have a whole training on the difference between the two, and there's 7 different types of integrators in a business. There's actually not just one style. There's the MVP, the heir apparent, the other half. There's multiple different types, and every visionary needs to go find the right integrator for them.
Interesting.
Yeah. So based on your profile, like for example, for me, I call myself a larger than life type visionary, high B profile and predictive index, that kind of thing. I have to have the other half. So where I have a high A, high B profile, my COO has a low A, low B profile. Right? He is the other half. His whole thing is anti-risk, you know, structure, things like that. And I have to respect that. Right? We need those people, but we don't respect those people.
For sure.
Right?
For sure. I think that's a great point. I think everybody thinks that hey, I need this. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, well, you know, hey, let's think about this. Let's look at this process. Is that a good move right now? And then, you know, the visionaries, they're like, oh, well, you know, he's just a naysayer, right? He's just trying to poo-poo the business. He's scared. He's playing small, right? And then all of a sudden they justify it in their own head to go and pursue that, and then they get their ass handed to them because they weren't actually looking at things from all different angles. They were only looking at it from their own.
The other thing, too, is you have to understand that an integrator type personality, COO, they're there to play defense a lot of times, right? They're there for blocking and tackling.
That's a great point.
Where entrepreneurs are, let's push the gas. We were actually, I'll give you a scenario, we were actually with a client recently where the COO was holding a leader accountable on their team. And the leader took such offense to it. Okay, the COO had somebody in charge of sales, right? And took such offense to it, they're like, if you don't back down a little bit, I'm gone. Said this in the meeting.
Wow.
And now this person brings in a ton of money for this organization. And it scared the visionary, right? And the COO is like, no, I'm not backing down. You need to do what you said you were going to do. Like, do it. This is a problem. And he just like, he looks at the leader and he's like, man, you better step in here. And he says, okay, I'm done. Don't listen to what she's saying.
Oh, no.
Totally undermine her, cut her legs out from right or anything.
Oh, no.
He said, if you think it's the right thing to do, then you're in charge of that department. Go do it. You think that CEO is going to want to stay there?
Nope.
Terrible leader.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Right? And so that's the hardest thing is when we want good people, want good leaders, good managers around us, we got to lead us. You know, Tim, people will hire us and pay us 20 grand to come in and restructure the whole business, right? But I tell them that they're the problem, and I have a $150 leadership course, they won't buy it, right? It is insane to me how little people are willing to work on themselves to lead the organization. And so a lot of times many times I have to look at them and go, you want to go to scale? Find somebody else to take it to scale. Well, like, no, I'm taking it to scale. No, you can't.
You're not
the leader to do it.
It's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, I don't want to brag on somebody. I won't say a lot of names, but I'll tell you, Eric Brewer, I don't know if you know Eric Brewer.
Yeah, no.
But he works with me and he coaches with Sharper, and I was just on a call with him this afternoon. We're spearheading something together. But when I walked in Eric Brewer's office 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, Eric would tell you he wasn't a good leader, right? And his business had stayed stalled where it was because of it. And Eric has become one of the best leaders that I have seen in real estate, like by far one of the best. And his business reflects that.
Yeah.
Right? He stays out of the way. He comes up with a vision. He innovates. And that's the other thing, too. I think one of the things that hurts a visionary integrator relationship is when the COO of the organization is required to innovate the product. Right?
Where the COO is?
Yeah. Visionary goes, well, that's what I hired you to do.
That's not what their job is, yeah.
Not their job.
Yeah.
Their job, by nature of the name, is to harmoniously integrate the product, right? You know, right now we're going through change in real estate.
Yeah.
A lot of change is happening. If the COO, visionary of the organization, isn't actively involved in the business right now, they're not going to be here. Because their job is to come back in and innovate the product. Not lean on the COO to innovate.
Yep.
Hershey in the early 1900s, product struggling, recessionary period, right? He comes out of retirement.
Yep.
Adds peanuts to the Goodyear bar, calls it the Goodyear bar, and says, we're going to have a good year. The world was struggling to buy food. They weren't buying a candy bar. When you have people starving to death and families moving in together and things like that, and they can't afford a meal, and he adds a protein source, first meal replacement candy bar, by the way, to his candy bar, and he innovates it.
More caloric value, more protein value, more carbs than anything else.
And
that was on the market. You couldn't buy anything else for 5 cents. That provided more caloric value than that bar.
And he innovated his product, had better year that year than he ever had.
Made more money in the recession than he did in the roaring 20s.
And so many people are scared of change. I don't get it. Like I always tell people the amount of how scared you are of change is how much belief you have in yourself to innovate your product. I don't get fearful.
I think that's
change.
a great point. It all boils down to your level of confidence in yourself in order to go and make it happen. Yeah.
And if you're living visionary by this way, is not a beach seat, right? If you've been living on the beach and sitting in the visionary seat, you're robbing your resource from your own company. I like the beach seat. It's the owner's box. Go live there. Director of the board's a great place to be. But then go hire a visionary to be that for your company. Right? Everybody always thinks the visionary is on the business seat. Its job is to work on the business more in it than in it. But it's still in the business seat. Right? It's still a required seat there. So I think those are some of the things that cause a business to fail.
I think that's a great point. I think everybody who starts a business thinks that they have to be in that CEO role. I remember sitting in on a panel, so I went through like the 10,000 small businesses with the Goldman Sachs program, and they had somebody come in, and she's like, listen, I wasn't the visionary, right? It was hard for me to accept that, but I realized I didn't want to sit in that seat. I like going out and consulting with my clients and actually being in their office and hanging out and engaging with them. And I wasn't the person who was going to be running the business as a visionary. She said, but like I felt so obligated to do that because I'm the CEO of my company and because I'm the owner of my company. And she's like, and then somebody told me I didn't have to, and I could just hire somebody else to run that role, and I could go back to doing the consulting stuff. And she's like, that just lifted such a weight off my shoulders, and helped the business grow more because somebody was in that seat who liked doing those activities, and she could go back to doing what she wanted to do.
Right. No, it's perfect. Every one of my businesses I own right now have a visionary and an integrator. I don't want to be.
It's not you sitting in all those seats.
No. And everybody says, Gary, you're a business coach, but you're the one out coaching businesses because I get to choose to do what I want. Right? Like I love coaching. Right? I love it with passion. And it's part of my purpose. Why would I give up that? Why? Just so I can run a business? I don't want to run the business.
Yeah.
Right? And so I bring these people in, and I say, hey, you're the visionary. Here's my integrator. Guys, make it happen. Right? Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, I own the brand. Mm-hmm. It's my name. I'm still the director of the board. Guess who reports to the director of the board? The visionary.
Yeah.
They report to me, right? But I'm not creating the vision. Every quarter they come in, they present their vision to me. They tell me how much owner distribution I'm going to get, and I decide whether or not I like the plan for the next 90 days, right? Or do I have to find a new visionary? Right? So, I mean, that's what I look at.
Yeah. So do you sit down with them and you work with them on a quarterly basis to help implement that vision, or they just present it to you and then you say yes or no, or let's tweak?
They meet with their team, their leadership team. They create the vision for the company. Then they meet with me and my wife at Michael Jordan's restaurant in downtown Chicago for a nice meal because the business is going to buy my dinner. Yeah. And then we have a discussion about what's next, like where we're going and where are we taking this and how much money do we make? And did we hit our key profit indicator?
I love it.
And as a shareholder, they better make me money.
Yeah.
If they don't, then I got the wrong visionary.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point, man. This is such an insightful conversation. I need you to come in and just, like, I think we got a lot of good things going on, but I know that there's holes in the boat somewhere that somebody from an outside perspective, like when you're in the picture frame, you can't see the full picture, right? Sure. When you're inside the frame, you can't see the full picture. And so to have that outside perspective of somebody who's like, I've seen 100 businesses. I've seen 1,000 businesses. Here's where the gaps are. Here's what you're missing. Here's these little tweaks that make huge improvements and create massive momentum in the business in order to take this thing 5 years, 10 years, 50 years down the road. Yeah. It's just powerful, man. It's powerful. Thank you. I gotta have you come in. And
I would love to.
My businesses. Yeah.
And we love working with people that are good people, right? Yeah. Like that's where we find our passion. It's not about the money anymore, right? It's 100% about who we're doing it with.
It's a lot more exciting seeing good people win,
Yeah, it is.
And helping them win and winning together. So awesome, man. Well, I'm excited to watch your Legacy Wealth Academy.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Masterclass, and let's continue the conversation. I'm gonna have you come in. I got half my team in Charleston, half my team in Cleveland, but we're going to make this happen. I'll bring them all down here and bring you back in.
I'd love to do it.
A couple months or something.
Be honored.
All right, buddy.
All right,
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hey, I hope you guys got a ton of value out of that. Gary obviously knows his stuff inside and out. This is one of those episodes that you probably want to watch a couple of times in order to really absorb everything. And if you want a few more details on Gary and what he does, we'll share his contact information in the show notes. And also check out Legacy Wealth Academy. It's lwacademy.com. Gary has a course in there all about what he does, kind of a master class on what he does, how he does it, and how small businesses can automate and put systems and processes and people in place to better grow more revenue, to have more predictable results, and just create a better, more effective, and more efficient business. So check out Legacy Wealth Academy. It's only $10 a month for a huge library of digital master classes. And if you guys would, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel, and please share this with anybody else who you think would get some serious value out of it. That's why we do what we do. It's why we create as much value as we can in order for it to be shared with as many people as possible, and it helps the numbers and the algorithm and all that other kind of stuff if you like, share, and subscribe. So until next time, I appreciate you guys. Be your best.